Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to another episode of Her Progeny. Today we have a truly special guest joining us, someone whose work sits at a really important intersection of clinical expertise, community, and faith. Sister Zainab Shalchi is an experienced mental health clinician, a training and leadership facilitator, and a community mentor. She brings both the professional grounding of clinical practice and a deep empathetic understanding of what it actually means to be human, and that combination is rare. And beyond her clinical work, she's also a member of the Muslim Family Hub, a platform supporting God-centric living. Today, we're going to be exploring relationships with ourselves, with others, and with Allah, mental and emotional well-being. The tension between Eastern and Western mentalities, approaches to suffering, and what it really means to come back to yourself. This is a conversation that I think many of us need, and so without further delay, Sister Zainab, Salaam alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you so much for coming today. I know it was really hard to find some time for us.
It's hard to coordinate, but it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting
so
me.
much. I really appreciate you being here. So, what first drew you to thinking on a deeper level about relationships and the inner well-being of yourself, of others? How did you come about in this area of expertise?
I think I'd like to say it's an accident, but I think anyone who knows me will know that I don't believe in accidents. I think there is a path, subhanAllah, and Allah puts things in your way to maybe draw your attention or opportunities that make you kind of notice things. I think I've always been quite reflective. I was very, very blessed. My father, Allah yarhamah, he was very emotionally intelligent. We had deep conversations from very small age when I was small. And I think it made me very curious about the inner world that we maybe feel and isn't apparent to others. I think maybe also having lived through the Gulf War briefly and then having trained in physical health in pharmacy, I always thought something was missing and it didn't really tackle the inner world. So I joke sometimes that I'm a pharmacist who's against medication because I do use it as a last resort. And I really do think there's so much more. And I'd like to look deeper because often, even if we are going to use medication to treat something, let's understand what we're dealing with first in a holistic way.
Let me just start by asking the audience to read Surah Al-Fatiha for the soul of your father. Inshallah, Allah grants him the highest level of paradise. I do know that nothing ever, you never fully recover after a loss of a parent. So sorry for your loss. Thank you for sharing that. So if you were to, I know you're against medication and
I'm not against medication.
Not against medication.
Yeah. I just like to see the wider picture.
The wider picture. Yeah. So how would that wider picture start in terms of the conversation today about relationships? How would you define a relationship? How would you set that first step into trying to look at it in a deeper, different level?
I think as I've started understanding more about reflecting more about how we operate as humans and the intersection between body and mind, which is much more understood now and it's much more appreciated. Sadly, I think in medicine, people do pigeonhole. So people will be specialists in sometimes even an organ rather than necessarily body or mind. But there's more of an appreciation that they are very much connected. And we're not just body and mind, we are also then spiritual beings and spiritual and relational beings. So we'll have relationships with everything around us, including nature, including everything, including ourselves, including Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the way I would define relationships is how we sit in a wider collective. And the dynamic between myself as Zainab with something else or someone else, or even with myself, and how that changes with time and how that dynamic can really shift, impacting both sides.
I think, yeah, like you said, relationships aren't just something that's social. They're a sort of spiritual architecture where connects
Yeah.
absolutely everything.
Yeah.
So how would you say the relationship with ourselves, with others, and with Allah are all interconnected?
I guess the first relationships we have are with our parents, and we learn to either copy or sometimes to avoid things that they taught us. As we grow older, there would have been things that we want to emulate in ourselves and maybe in our marriages, with our children, and this is our model of how we see things. And our environment brings us up. All of these things will have an impact on how we see the world. But then as we become adults, we start to see that there's much wider than that. And we start to recognize that actually even my relationship with myself impacts my relationship with my husband and my relationships at work and my relationship with everyone else. And they're connected because they all feed back to some of the same insecurities and maybe some of the same deficiencies and some of the same traits that we want to notice about ourselves, whether good or bad, that we want to work on or that we want to notice and maybe do more of. And the relationship with Allah, I guess, is the oldest. It's the one that we've had for the longest, but sometimes we give the least appreciation to. And the more I read about it and the more I study, the more I realize this is the relationship we sometimes think we have, but we don't really appreciate it. We don't really, it's neglected. And moving away from that is where the suffering comes in. And I think I'm talking about just day-to-day suffering. They are all interconnected. Like mind and body are interconnected, mind, body, and soul are also connected. But it's not apparent day to day, and therefore sometimes we don't really think about it.
It's really interesting that you mentioned about the first understanding of relationships as something we get from our parents, because Imam al-Hussein in Dua Arafah actually speaks about this as well.
Yeah.
And I remember even like my own personal experience. I grew up with a beautiful relationship between my mom and dad, and really it set the grounds of how I expected every other relationship in my life to be. And I remember sometimes if I would have an argument with someone, I was just so taken aback because I was like, this is not normal. This can't possibly be.
It sets your worldview.
Absolutely.
And it sets your expectations.
It's a really hard adjustment as well to be accepting of different relationships, all within bounds of being healthy and successful, but looking so completely different to what you grew up with.
And no matter how much our parents' relationship with us tests us, it never tests us as much as when we go out into the world. And that can be a shock to the system as well.
And I think if you've had a healthy upbringing, because that foundation at its core is of security, of trust, of safety.
Absolutely.
The way you're saying, like, it would test us, but that core won't get shaken in what you experience with your family.
Yeah.
Whereas with other relationships, maybe the foundation's a bit more rocky or something. And so you're going to...
And it starts to draw attention.
It starts to draw a bit of attention, and then it might confuse you as how to best deal with it.
Yeah.
So do you mind expanding a bit on the relationship with your parents and how this will change as we get older in the different phases of our lives?
So like we said, or the way I understand it is actually it sets the first model of what you expect. But your parents, with all their faults, they want the best for you. They have, they do their best with the skills and the attributes that they have and the limitations that they have. And they tend to be our first role models, and they tend to be our first taste of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah. Like you said in Dua Arafah, it's beautiful the way it's laid out, as we were cared for in such a way. And in most cases, I know that's not the case for everybody. We are cared for and left not wanting. However, there is always going to be an inherent need beyond our parents. And you feel that even from a young age. You feel like my parents don't fully understand me. And your parents don't know your inner world unless they really explore it. So it's your world. It's your whole world to start with. As a baby, it is your whole world. But then you start to outgrow it and you start to become I. And once you become I, it's actually a scary world. And subhanallah, as we develop, there is always a sense of perfection we are seeking, whether it's in friendship, whether it's in our appearance, whether it's in marriage when we're old enough. And there is always a tendency to that kamal because we have tasted it. We have tasted it in a primordial world. And it's either directed in a healthy way or it can be misdirected. And unfortunately, in today's world, actually, you have to go really against the tide to direct it in a healthy way.
And I think that Kamal that we're all trying to reach goes back to the first point you made about the unfortunate thing that's happening, that sometimes we're neglecting our relationship with Allah. And do you feel like this is something that you see where people might be giving various different relationships 110% while neglecting others and somehow expecting there to be some sort of equilibrium that takes place and for all things to fit in together? And does that work?
You're a mum as well. So I think you'll probably understand it's impossible to give every relationship your all the time. And there will always be maybe a prioritization of one over the other. So when I was studying, that maybe I gave that a little bit more time. When you have your first baby, or when, in the early baby stages, you're giving the baby more than maybe your parents or your husband, I think it's difficult to have balance all the time. But I think that awareness is so important, that we do have different relationships, and we are a combination of those different relationships, including the relationship we have with ourselves, which develops over time, and it develops deliberately or unintentionally. And if we want it to develop deliberately, we need to be aware of what is actually happening. And I feel in today's age, we are so manipulated, we are so swept with the tide, that actually the awareness is very neglected.
It's really hard.
It's not there.
It's really hard to be aware of the tide when you really don't have time, or you've been forced to live a life, or you've chosen to live a life where you just don't have time to sit with yourself and think and even be aware of the tide that's taking place.
I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you on the time, because I think if there was a big family event or something very urgent, you would make the time. Is it the time? We all have 24 hours in the day. I absolutely believe that some people have more barakah than others, not because, Allah gives different people different barakah. It's because we access to different extents. And through our own actions, I think we can increase or decrease a barakah. There's a wonderful book. I know his first name is Muhammad, but his second name escapes me. He's an author and also a speaker from the Productive Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And he's written a book called The Barakah Effect. And I like this book because it's actually back to basics. And it started from an article he wrote, which was Barakah culture versus hustle culture, which was really, really interesting. And actually, it started to compare the abundance mindset of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his bounties, his rahmah, his blessings, comparing that to the hustle culture, which is actually I need my independence, I'm self-sufficient, I have to stand up for myself or nobody will. But what happens is, if we are in hustle culture, we are closing in on ourselves. We're doing feeling an injustice alone
to ourselves while thinking.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
It is so much pressure. You feel like it's me against the world. You feel like there is a limited share and I have to grab it. And actually, we weren't created this way, because there is so much that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises us. But when we close our kind of ourselves to that, the ayah says, وَمَنْ يُعْرِضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. And I looked up dhanka because I didn't actually know what it actually meant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only time it appears in the Quran. And it's a very kind of curious word. And it's strain and it's tightness. And it just reminded me so much of kind of restlessness and depression. And I'm not saying it's the same. Yeah, I'm not saying it's the same thing. And I absolutely do believe there are specific kind of difficulties and maybe transmitters and so on that might be lacking in certain people, and then they will need medication and so on. And there are different levels and extents of mental health difficulties. But I think the day-to-day melancholy that we feel, I really do feel a lot of it is we have the power to change. And that tightness is because of our turning away, our i'rad. If we turn away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's giving us, but we are turning away. And therefore we don't access in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do recommend that the guest read the book that you just recommended. I do believe the author's name was Muhammad Faris,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
anyone who wants to go
Yeah.
look the book
And there
up.
are some nice interviews, and you can read the article. The article is a shortened version.
Yeah.
It's a nice one that compares self-sufficiency versus the collective.
Mm-hmm.
And the lovely thing about Islam, and actually it's really not about Islam, it's about the human fitrah. It's how we were created. It's the module that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us, the system that He's created draws us back to Him. And the more we move away from our fitrah, the more suffering we inflict on our own selves.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the example you gave about balancing different things at different times of your life and relationships having some kind of balance, my understanding is it's really not about giving the various relationships the same amount of time or effort. Of course, the different circumstances that are taking place in your life are going to affect different relationships.
100%.
Whether it's the examples that you gave or anything else. You can have maybe not the newborn phase. You can have, let's say, even a set of twins, but one of them has a difficulty or not even an illness, just going through, I don't know, being bullied in school, for example. Of course, the time and attention that you're going to be giving to that child and that scenario is going to be different. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Where do you think the line will start to show for when a relationship becomes unhealthy? Because going back to the balance thing, obviously we have various different duties.
Yeah, we're pulled in lots of different directions.
We're pulled in lots of different directions, and we have to try and fulfill those duties and those responsibilities to the best of our potential, and always try and push ourselves for more. And sometimes that might mean there's a bit of a struggle on a relationship, and that's okay as well, because there's other things that need to be prioritized at that moment. But where do you think would be the starting point in you realizing a specific relationship is potentially an unhealthy relationship at this point and something needs to change?
So I think we can sense it, but I think we need to have our minds and our hearts open. Like you say, I think it's impossible to juggle everything equally all the time and give everything its haq all the time. And there will be times when one of your children, my children, are going through different exams at the moment. And the ones who have exams and are really struggling are getting more of my attention. And then the others have to take a backseat just for a short time while I support those. After I finished my studies, I realized actually I neglected my marriage quite a bit. So I started kind of focusing on how do I reconnect and understand my husband's world when I'd neglected it maybe, and we hadn't touched base, really understood each other's situations and work and inner world for about 6 months or a year or even longer sometimes. So I think we can sense it if we are honest with ourselves and if we take the time to notice. You will have friends that you kind of maybe touch base with at different points, but you will know that every friendship needs maintenance in some way. It needs effort. It needs attention for it to thrive. And the ones that don't thrive, a lot of the time, it's either because it was a circumstantial maybe friendship and you've lost kind of a lot of that connection, or because one or both of you have neglected the relationship. So I think it's the same with a lot of our relationships. If we are honest with ourselves, it's some relationships do run their course, like we said, with some friendships or school moms or whatever it may be. But if we actually take the time to notice, are we speaking differently? Are we resentful? Do we feel less safe or more resentful in that person's presence? Or have we been honest with them? And if I feel maybe I haven't tapped into my daughter's world for a while and I've noticed her behavior might be changing, it might not be necessarily that the relationship is broken. It might just be that it's become a little bit more distant. If I am very busy with something else, they might not interrupt me. They might leave me to it, and they need me to kind of become available to them again. There's a lot of responsibility on us and a lot of different directions that we're pulled in. And even the relationship we have with ourselves is actually maybe our health and maybe our ilm, our knowledge. So actually, there is a lot of balls to juggle. And a workshop I actually did in Camp UK, which I didn't think that would really stay with me. The workshop facilitator got us to just take a blank sheet of paper, and he put each of our different relationships and asked us to rank them. And then he asked us to rank them last year. And he asked us to rank them where we want them to be next year. It wasn't a difficult exercise, but it needed a bit of reflection.
And a lot of honesty.
A lot of honesty, uncomfortable honesty.
Yeah.
It needed vulnerability. It needed me to say, actually, maybe I'm not giving my health what it needs. Or maybe I've given all of these relationships a lot of nutrition, but I don't feel connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anymore. And I need to tap into that. And it needs effort. It needs awareness and honesty first, but then it needs effort and it needs a plan, just like anything. But it doesn't need to be difficult.
No, I agree. And I think that one of the main takeaways from everything that you've just said as well is the idea that just because there's a specific strain on a relationship or due to circumstances, not enough time or attention has been paid, it doesn't mean it's broken.
No.
And unfortunately, we do live in an era as well that is, the simplest thing that can come up or the simplest argument or a little bit of distance, people straight away become really pessimistic about that relationship and start maybe feeling that that relationship doesn't actually have a future or there's no strengthening this relationship or, the world has ended.
Yeah, it seems very dramatic. It seems like this must be the end.
And maybe that's not a bad thing. For the idea of it being dramatic, if we take that instead of to call it quits, to be like, okay, what's the course of action?
Yeah, it's a siren,
yeah,
right? It's an emergency. Let's look at where we need to make changes. And I absolutely do believe some relationships need to end. And there are red flags and there are things that we shouldn't accept or tolerate. And, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants dignity for us as much as he wants us to give dignity to others. So I think that is something we need to safeguard as well. But the tide that we live in, and this is the default that I'm talking about, is reframes suffering or difficulties, or there's a sense of I'm entitled to be happy. I deserve to be happy. And I actually
happiness is the overall goal.
I think in secular culture, happiness is the overall goal. And subhanallah, when I looked up happiness in the Quran, it only exists with relations to the akhirah. There is no kind of sa'id or sa'ada that is attributed to the dunya at all.
Wow.
And it was like it really hit me. And then I started looking for what kind of feelings do we want to seek in the dunya? And it's actually more rida.
What are we chasing?
And it's more sakina. It's more peace and contentment. And subhanallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنَّا جَعَلْنَاكُمْ I think it's, how was it? وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ. يعني we are created to be people of the middle. And this is why I love this book, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. So he does have a spiritual background, not Muslim, but he talks about this middle path. And sometimes I feel a little bit annoyed that I have to learn about these Islamic concepts and these fitri concepts from non-Muslims, but sometimes it's set in a way and the analogies are so good that it really helps me to embed that. And any time that we are not in balance and we're not in the middle, we need to notice so that we can bring ourselves back in the middle.
So how would we go about assessing that? How would someone... Because you're making it sound really easy. You're making it sound like...
I really don't want to make it sound difficult or easy. Yeah. I think it's just... It just needs us to just be
I
aware.
Love that attitude.
Aware.
It's not about it being easy or difficult. Yeah. It's just about knowing...
It is so necessary.
What's necessary, where we're trying to reach, and obviously that the steps, what the steps are to try and get there. But if it was you, let's say 20 years ago, hearing this, do you think it would sit with you the way it would sit with yourself now? What kind of advice would you tell yourself for your 20-year ago version of yourself when it comes to this exact mindset?
I absolutely love being over 40 because I really do feel like I understand myself and the world around me so much more than when I did when I was 20. And I love that I am able to not think everything is a big deal. And I love that I am on my own journey, and I've recognized it's my own journey and it will differ from other people's journey. And therefore, I can look left and right for inspiration and
While still being content.
while still focusing on my own journey. The reason, actually, this reminded me as well, the horse on this book. And this ties into your point. Because the Islamic model of psychology, which is based, I think, it started with Imam al-Ghazali, and it started with like early Muslim scholars and mystics. It's a really nice analogy of the horse. So we have mind, body, and soul. And if our body is the horse and our mount and the rider are the aql, so actually the body, we do need the body for this world. The energy and the desires and everything that the body is needed by the aql for this world. The aql cannot operate in this world without the body. But the body cannot run riot. And the body will pull the aql in lots of different directions and do its own thing. So we don't want to kill it, because actually we want it to be hungry so that we can feed it and sustain it. And we want it to be healthy, and we want to look after it, and we want to clothe it, and we want it to procreate. That's all healthy. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that to be in the framework of somebody in control, somebody more rational in control. And that is where the aql comes in. So going back to your point of, what was your point?
I think it was about first levels, making it sound quite easy. And
yes.
also,
what would I do to say to my 20-year-old self?
Yeah.
So I think I'm trying to make it easy so that my 20-year-old self will also be able to implement this, because I had very small children. I was studying. I was new to marriage and actually struggling with all the different dynamics and struggling with the new big family and having to meet so many different expectations and culturally. And there was a lot at 20 or 22 or, at the time that I got married. And I would just say to my 22-year-old self or 20-year-old self, find space for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your life.
Make space.
Find space.
Yeah.
There is space. But our day is so busy. But let's look at what we're busy with. If we have the same hours as everybody else, how do we increase the barakah in our time so that what we are doing is deliberate? It is intentional, and it's moving me in the right direction.
Well, other than just increasing the time, or I think that's where the role of the intention comes in as well, isn't it? There's so many things that we are doing that we are probably doing on autopilot as a young mother to kids, as a wife, as someone who's studying, as a daughter, as whoever. But the idea that your intention, if you're very aware of exactly what it is that Allah has asked of you and what your role and your responsibility is in serving Allah in the position that you are in yourself right now, it's really easy actually to be able to be doing all of those duties that you're already doing while getting the thawab, while doing it with the intention of serving Allah. And by not being really aware of why I'm doing this, or I'm doing this because of, X, Y, Z, and I'm doing it as a service of Allah, and being aware of the rewards that you're getting for that simple task, but just by having a clearer intention. Because
your intention is there.
Yeah, I think that's like, I've heard so many scholars, talk about the woman who just moves, apparently, not apparently, according to a hadith, just the lady who moves one glass of water from one side of the house to another with the intention of keeping the house maintained. There's so much ajr and barakah in that. And I think when we're in autopilot, we lose out on so many opportunities to be getting closer to Allah through what we were already going to be doing.
And it's not a contented existence. I think the rushing around and not making space to actually notice why I'm doing this and what the goal is never going to be fulfilling.
Yeah.
I'm just getting through things. There's a really nice wasiyah from Imam al-Kadhim to Hisham al-Hakam, who is one of the companions, I think, of Imam al-Kadhim and Imam Sadiq. And it's quite long, and I would really recommend people read it because it's very beautiful in Arabic. And there's a part that says, "Inna lillahi ala nasi hujjatain, zahira wa batina." Allah has two signs or two miracles for people, an apparent one and a hidden one. The apparent one is the Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa ahlul bayt, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhim. And the batina is the aql. Are we tapping into our aql? If we know that this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and coming into your niyyah, further on in this wasiyah, he said, "Man hasanat niyyatahu, zuyida fi rizqih."
So your actions are not going to be changing again. It's just being aware of the intention.
If your intention is purified, hasanat, you purify it. And Kauthar Abbas, who is a really awesome friend of mine, who I love, and she's full of wisdom, she had a talk recently in one of the centers where she talked about it's difficult to have your niyyah solely 100% towards Allah. There will always be other things with it. But be aware of that. Purify it as much as you can. Because there might be, like you say, as a mum, you are creating, you're making that food, or you're feeding that child, or you're taking the children to Arabic school, or whatever it may be. And yes, your niyyah is, I want them to grow closer to the Ahlul Bayt. I want them to become good Muslims. But it might also be, actually, I really want them to learn Arabic so that they can converse with my parents. There'll be other niyyat, not bad ones, but there'll be other niyyat. But there's also purification of that niyyah. And why does it increase the rizq? Isn't that interesting?
It's amazing.
So this brings me to my other book.
I'm loving these book recommendations.
This is my last one. I didn't actually. Next time I'll bring lots of books.
Please do, because I am actually going to try and read these.
So this is a really big book, and it's called Physicians of the Heart.
Okay.
And it has all the Asma Allah al-Husna.
MashaAllah.
MashaAllah. And it lets you reflect on it a bit more deeply. And I looked up Ar-Razzaq, and I thought, in the context of this, what is... Because we know, and I think I take it for granted, I speak for myself more than anyone else, because I'm an Arabic speaker, I know what that means, and therefore I move on. But rizq is sustenance in, yes, wealth, but also in health, also in ilm, also in rahmah, also in suhbah, also in people around you who give your life meaning. And again, with rizq, if I notice it, I can be grateful for it and I can appreciate it. If it's just one of those things I don't even notice, it just passes me by.
Another lost opportunity.
Another lost opportunity. And the rizq can also be opportunities. And this is where I talk about being much more self-aware. We become aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's blessings that He is putting in front of us. The hadith say, if somebody comes to you asking for help, this is someone that has been sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I know in today's society, there's homeless people everywhere and there's need all around the world, and it can be so overwhelming. How can we be everything to everybody? And I'm not saying we should, because we have our capacities as well. But it's reframing, rather than these people being a burden on you, where is the opportunity for me to grow? That is rizq.
Absolutely. I have a teacher I've had for around 7-8 years who does weekly classes with me now. Yeah. And one of the things she said a few months ago that really stood out to me was very similar to what you're saying, but it was also for the overstimulated moms who are, you can't catch 2 minutes to yourself without someone calling you, without someone needing something, without something breaking. And she was like, it's very common for, after a child has been calling you, for example, 2-3 minutes, you're going to get fed up and you're like, what is it? Yeah. Just leave me alone for a second. But reframing that and thinking of it, this innocent, pure soul needs me. Yeah. Allah has placed me in a position to make this child feel safe and secure and fulfill its needs. And just twisting that way of thinking in your own mind and shifting that will just allow you to have so much more patience and gratitude for that exact same situation. And that's why I think your perspective
I
plays
really
such
do
a big
think
role in
perspective is
everything that's
everything.
taking place.
Perspective is everything, but we need to be conscious and we need to be aware of it to actually see that. Otherwise, I think the culture, like I said, because of the cultural shift and the manipulation and the propaganda and the social media and everything that we are bombarded with all the time, actually people become a burden on you rather than becoming a rahmah
And
for
that's where the
you
whole
and for the
idea of
other person.
boundaries as well, isn't it? It's like anyone who asked for too much of your time or needed too much,
Yeah.
straight away the answer you're given is you haven't set strong boundaries. Work on your boundaries. Instead
So
of
I have a slight nuance on boundaries because I think as somebody who is a recovering people pleaser,
okay.
I would say boundaries are actually part of a haq towards ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, again, it's in this book. He talks about how, so Michael Singer talks about how to be able to keep ourselves comfortable, what we've done is in a big, vast field of beauty, we have created four walls and we're sitting within them. And this is where I think a lot of people's suffering comes in now. Because if people are toxic, if people are overstepping my boundaries, if people are a burden on my time, on my energy, guard your space, guard your peace, guard your everything, then actually all I'm doing is cutting myself off. And there will be people that you might have to keep some distance from. But we are relational and we do have responsibilities. And part of the balance, part of the ummatan wasata that I spoke about earlier is about the relationship between an individual and the society. So the rights of and I hate to talk about rights because I really think
Well,
actually
I was just going to bring it up as well. I was going to say there's going to have to be a balance between, the examples of you're giving of toxic individuals that are perhaps having a detrimental effect on yourself,
yeah,
while finding the balance that we have read about, the various rights we have read about in Risalat al-Huquq, because depending on who that individual is,
you cannot cut them
you
off.
cannot cut them off.
No.
You cannot be disrespectful. You can't even maybe
Yeah.
try and maintain too much of a distance.
So what does it
because you have
require? It
you have
requires you to
responsibility.
really introspect and problem solve and find ways to be able to make their haqq, keep their haqq while also keeping yourself sane, able to function. It's really not about salat al-raham is a wajib. It's not even a nice to have. And therefore, what are we learning from the relationships with those people? Because I'm one of those people who feels like we can learn from every single person who we come across.
Absolutely.
So what am I learning about myself from people who use me? That's a lesson for me as well. I need to stand up for myself. I need to maybe get better at advocating for myself.
Or I might just have to as well be more aware that I don't treat other people in the way that I'm being treated.
100%,
That
because
upsets
it's
me.
a mirror to you as well.
That's what I think usually when I find myself in a situation with someone treating me in a specific way that I don't like. I try and take a step back and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and be very aware of this characteristic that I'm not loving and try to avoid doing this to anyone else, because that's a lesson as well.
Yeah.
Being aware of it. So, as we were saying at the beginning, we are not just minds and bodies. We're minds and bodies and souls in a constant conversation with each other. And you gave the beautiful analogy of the horse. And I think because these things are happening simultaneously all the time, without us realizing, it might be easy to neglect one of those dimensions.
Yeah.
And that neglection, I think, wouldn't be something very loud all the time. It might start as a simple whisper for you to realize that one of these dimensions, and most likely, your soul, is being neglected. What are the first signs for someone, do you think, other than that whisper? How would you recognize that whisper? How would you be more aware that there might be a bit of an imbalance in my relationship with Allah, with my religion, with myself, before we focus and expand on the other relationships around us?
I think it's also easy to neglect the mind or not to realize how we can influence the mind with the body. Just like we said, the aql doesn't have an inherent kind of tangible being in itself, and it needs the body to operate. The mind also relies on the body for constant feedback, constantly. So it's checking in, and whether it's emotions and whether it's thought processes, whether it's memory, recall, all of that is impacted by the body. And you might see on social media and just like everywhere that how they're saying we've become so much more sedentary, especially since COVID. And actually, the recent NHS mental health report I think it's an interim report, so they're still looking into it and finalizing it and doing the data. And the Office of National Statistics also collects data on this sort of thing all the time, found that the most lonely generations are the 16 to 24-year-olds.
Wow.
And then the 65 plus. 65 plus, you can kind of understand. They've retired, maybe they've lost a spouse, maybe they have physical health conditions, maybe they have loss of independence. But why would the 16 to 24-year-olds be lonely?
They should be in their prime with,
They
their
are
school
surrounded
friends
by
and new
people.
opportunities.
And best what's happened, and the interim report actually recognizes this, there's been a drop in satisfaction with life, a drop in satisfaction with appearance at 16 to 24.
What we would give to go back to being
What
16.
we would exactly right. Now I'm looking into creams after 40.
Yeah.
I can't imagine people 16 to 24-year-olds are so fixated on what they look like, unhappy with friendships, unhappy with schools, or kind of being at school. But what's happened is our lifestyle is not supporting good health, and our good health is holistic health. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. So if we don't move, if we are constantly behind a screen, whether it's at work or at school or on the sofa slumped with bad posture, the feedback that is coming to the brain is not going to be the same as somebody who's out in nature, filled with kind of fresh air, and a sense of wonder and awe, feeling the wind, being on their feet, getting their heart pumping. It's not going to be the same. So we are not doing ourselves any favors for our mind, let alone our soul, by keeping our body so inactive.
Well, 2 points from that. First of all, for the people that have spent, their whole day, for example, on the TV or a device or the phone, the thing is, it doesn't even end there. Even when it comes to nighttime and you've left the device, that usage has now affected your sleep in a way where your body is
100%,
continually going to get negatively affected because of the sleep that you're getting. And another point, but a bit off topic, but I couldn't help myself from my mind going there. Now, when you were talking about the mind controlling the body and that belief that we have, where, again, I think a bit of the Western culture is very much like your body, your body, your body, while neglecting the soul and the mind. But a story that I was raised with was, back in Iraq, Saddam, prison, Abu Ghraib, torture chambers. One of the stories my dad, I've heard so many times, is that, they would be lined up waiting for their turn to get tortured. And you can hear the person before you as well, which is, I'm told, one of even harder sometimes than yourself enduring that. And one time when my dad was waiting for his turn, the man that came out of the torture chamber looked very young, very handsome, exhausted. And he said to my dad, "How are you doing?" And he said, "I think this time I'm going to break." Keep in mind, this is after numerous consecutive days. And he said, "I think I'm going to break. I don't think my body can handle anymore." And the man replied with a hadith from one of our Ahlul Bayt, which unfortunately is not coming to my mind right now, but to the meaning of your body will not give up unless your mind does.
Yes.
And for as long as your mind is set on something, then your body will do that. And, Baba says that in that moment, I felt so much energy and contentment and strength come within me from the words of the Ahlul Bayt that, alhamdulillah, we're blessed with so much of. But again, we need to go after and seek.
We close our own selves, or maybe we just don't notice it.
Yeah.
And this is where I love pondering on Asma Allah al-Husna, or a specific hadith, or what does that mean? Because actually it opens up. And Dua Arafah, Sheikh Jawad, when he did the book on Dua Arafah, or he did I listened to the audio book, it gives you such an appreciation for the dua. And recently with reading Ziyarat Aminullah, like there's so much in there, and we are asking Allah for our internal state.
Yeah.
You know, we are asking him to give us peace inside. We are asking him to give us that strength. It's really just tapping into that. We know it's available. Sometimes we just don't.
Well, it's even more available than you might think, because Sheikh Mustafa has written recently the book The Trustee of Allah, which is a commentary on Ziyarat Aminullah. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So I wish I had one to give to you right now, but for the audience as well, if they want to
Inshallah,
read more about it and the connection.
Another underappreciated ziyarah, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah, we're just blessed with so much around us.
So much, and sometimes because there is so much, maybe we don't prioritize anything.
Yeah.
And
we think there's too much that we wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
But that neglection is a bit sad, isn't it? Because I want, if you're okay with it, I want you to talk a bit about the effects of neglecting various different aspects of our duties and responsibilities, starting with ourselves. It's easy to just say, okay, it's a lost opportunity, or I'm neglecting something, or I haven't fulfilled a responsibility, but it's so much deeper than that, isn't it?
Absolutely. The idea is we want to get to a place where we are in balance, and we don't know we're off balance unless we account for ourselves or we look inwards. And Imam al-Kadhim also says, ليس منا من لم يحاسب نفسه باليوم والليلة. طبعا they talk so much about journaling and so much about mindfulness and so much about reflection in the morning, reflect at night. It's, that now it's reached us even through that lens. And actually recently, even in the Mental Health Trust, they were doing some training on the impact of spiritual health on mental health.
SubhanAllah.
Because there's a recognition that actually people who do have a faith, they have more hope. They reframe suffering. They know there's an afterlife. And therefore, they are much stronger in dealing with difficulties.
I do think we're going to need to have a whole second episode about reframing distress and suffering. Honestly, I think that unfortunately we're not going to have enough time because it's such a deep subject. But the different perspectives of the cultures and of the religious perspective of it and stuff. That's going to need a whole conversation of its own, inshallah.
100%. But I think it is that muhasabah, that kind of just taking stock, that helps you to notice, oh, I reacted in this way today. Why did I overreact? Why did I shout at my child for something that maybe I wouldn't normally think to do that? Or why did the fact that this person say this hurt me so much? And, it doesn't necessarily have to be about big sins or little sins. It might just be about getting curious about our inner world. What is it? What is this saying about me? And what do I need to look at? Because it might be that actually my body is being neglected. And when my body is neglected, then my mind is also not at its best. Like we said, when we are on screens all day, we are also not connecting to people.
Or with ourselves.
Or with ourselves.
Right?
Or with ourselves. And I noticed I'm trying to really make an effort to multitask, as all moms do. So I thought, if I'm sitting down at my computer all day, I need to go for a walk in the evening, but I'd also need to see my family.
And you also need to make the dinner.
And I also need to make the dinner. So after dinner, I'll take one of my kids out for the walk so that I'm walking, but I'm also catching up with one of them.
2 birds and 1 stone.
Exactly. Often it includes some kind of bribery, and I'm not ashamed to say that. So I'll have to buy them a chai or something like that to get them out. But I noticed, and I'm so ashamed to say this, that making eye contact with my own children has become much more difficult than it was.
Wow.
Making eye contact, because we just don't do it. And getting vulnerable and apologizing and really understanding them is so much more difficult. But when you do it, you can see that they become so uplifted, and I become uplifted. And that connection is what they are really lacking. These 16 to 24-year-olds, is because nobody's really taking the time to understand them. And they are also not making the effort to understand anybody else.
I'm just thinking, if us as the older generation is struggling with this when it comes to our kids, I can just imagine how it would be between themselves.
So you've seen bus stops. If you
Yeah.
pass in bus stops, do you see anybody looking at anyone?
No, there isn't even like the small talk.
No,
We've
there's no
passed
small
even
talk.
the hello, how you doing? How's your day?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Everyone's in
actually,
their
they
own
noticed
world.
in COVID at the time, because the coffee shops and everything closed, that those very brief random interactions with people, the impact of that on mental health, actually just dropping the kind of thank you and the good mornings and so on with the barista, for example, at the coffee shop, even losing that had an impact on people's self-confidence, on their relational skills. A lot of the teens now, a lot of the parents complain or find, that they're worried about their social skills that their children are building or not building.
Not building.
Because they are not doing it, because it's more about comfort.
Right.
And the more comfortable you
I mean,
get, the more you close yourself inside those four walls.
Because it's a very temporary, shallow
It's
comfort.
closing in.
That's, yeah,
It is closing
not
in.
sustainable.
Because it's less fulfilling. And what they're doing is neglecting actually all of their faculties in that sense. Because we taste the world through our senses. And if our senses and our attention, our eyes, our ears, our mind are all fixated into that screen, we're missing out on all the other cues. Looking out the window from the car, nobody has the patience to wait in a queue without a phone or to make small talk, like you said, in the supermarket. I was in a supermarket yesterday and I was shocked. It wasn't the supermarket that I normally go to. I just went in briefly, but they looked short-staffed. And the queues were much longer than I would have expected. But people were so angry. People were really tense. They were just jumping from one queue to another, I think maybe to save 10 minutes. It's maximum 10 minutes. I'm not talking, it wasn't an hour's queue. But we have de-skilled ourselves. We have lowered our tolerance of waiting. We have lowered we can't handle boredom.
No, I know a very dear friend of mine actually recently was telling me about a Harvard study where it was very simple. They would put people in a room where I think they had to be in that room for 15 minutes. The only catch is you're not allowed to do anything. So you don't have any devices. You're not going to be able to talk to someone. There's nothing in this room except a small device that you were told from the beginning, if you touch this, you're going to get electrocuted. Otherwise, you're just going to have to sit with yourself. And the percentage has now slipped my mind, but it was quite a high percentage of people that chose to go and get electrocuted. Some more than once.
Some stimulation of any kind.
Yeah, exactly. Just because it was so difficult for them to sit with themselves.
And it's happening to our generation. You're right. Yeah. It's happening to everyone.
It's just a more extreme form of the example you're giving in the supermarket or at the bus stop and everywhere else.
So that's where the neglect comes in. When you're looking at the whole picture, then something starts to go amiss and often brings the whole system down. And this is what I feel like is happening.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but you've blessed us with so many ayahs and hadiths today. Do you have anything to share with us about neglect?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure which one actually speaks to that, but two of them I think that I would want to bring in is from Surah Al-Baqarah. And this one I think a lot of people have had. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. So we will test you and we will afflict you with losses. And the loss is people. We will lose people. We will lose money. We will lose our health. We will lose lots of things. But this is a training ground for the sabirin and the sabr. And this is the kind of, again, reframing sabr. Sabr is not sitting and coping while things pass. Sabr is reflecting, asking Allah for help, but also doing what I can. لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. All we have is our striving. And وَلَسَعْيَهُ سَوْفَ يُرَى. Allah is witnessing that striving. And Allah promises us, وَإِن سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي أَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Not even tell them I am close. I am close. I'm here.
I mean, I did read.
You just need to turn towards me.
One of the interpretations was that's why he didn't even use the word I to show how close. Like, I am there.
Yes.
There.
إني قريب. Yeah. It's so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And this is where the simple antidote to neglect is just sit with Allah. Sit with Allah. And you know, when we sit in salah now, especially as mums, I think we are especially guilty of this. How many thoughts flood into our head just because it's the
so
only
hard to.
time that our minds are not busy
Well,
with
it
something
shouldn't
else.
be busy, but realistically,
It's
yeah.
but then we're busy for the rest of the day. We don't take any time to actually sit in stillness.
Yeah.
And therefore that becomes, it all floods in salah. And that's maybe good and bad. But maybe what if we sat 5 minutes? And I've noticed some dear sisters do this, and I've always been in such admiration. Sit 5 minutes before salah and let those thoughts come and center yourself. And I had a teacher, actually of Islamic psychology, who said, sit on your sajada and be ready for salah and think about someone you really, really love, and find that place in your heart, in your body, where you can feel that and connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that, and then start
I'm
your salah.
going to do that tonight, inshallah.
It gives salah a new meaning. It really makes you present. It makes you so much more present. What I try to do though, and the days that I do it, I really notice so much more barakah in my day. And the barakah culture, the barakah effect talks about this. There is so much barakah in early mornings. As parents, especially mums, actually, we don't want to wake up any earlier than we already wake up.
Every minute counts.
Every minute counts, and it's already, but then if we get up and we're go straight away, what if we took 10 minutes before that, read a page of Quran? I like to do it outside, or at least just open a window and hear the sounds, hear the birds while I'm reading. That those ayat will stay with me. I might reflect on them during the day, but then I've given myself just that time. You don't need to do anything. I think we are so fixated on, what do I need to do? Someone tell me what to do.
What's next?
Let's stop doing. Let's stop with the self-help, and let's just sit with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and find our own solutions. We know it's within us. It is
And
all
I think
within
for
us.
someone who's just, listening to these words and thinking, okay, how do I start? Even if maybe 5 minutes of Quran in the morning sounds too much, it can be as simple as waking up, looking out the window, sending your salam
And I've
to
done
the
that
Imam
too.
of our
Yes.
time,
Yes.
start your
Fit
day,
Isma,
and
100%.
just
Centering yourself.
yeah,
It's
we
that
can
grounding,
start with
that
very
centering that
small
you hear so
steps
much about.
until we
Or
work.
just even listening, al-nazar ila al-Kaaba ibadah. Why is it ibadah?
Yeah.
Because it connects you to the Khaliq. And if you look at a tree, I'm not saying it's the same thing, but if you notice the birds and you notice the tree and you notice the wind and you notice the rain, it fills you with awe. And I think we've
Absolutely.
lost that sense of awe.
Yeah.
I have to put a but, because I also think, although we are always looking for, help me how to do this, I can't start running until I've got the right trainers. I can't start dieting until I've got the right
always trying to
regimen.
find an
We
excuse
need to
to
find
delay
to delay.
something.
We're
Yeah.
procrastinating for the perfect solution. But actually, we need to do. And I'm not saying sit with Allah. That's a completely different thing. And make space for that, because you will be surprised at the strength and the connection that you feel just with a few minutes.
Inshallah.
But at the same time, if we are afraid of something, Imam Ali alayhi salam says, وَإِذَا خِفْتَ شَيْئًا قَعْبِهِ. There's the only way, if you are fearing something, if you fear making a new friend, if you fear starting a new project, you need to do it. You need to make small steps, because that's the only way to get over the fear.
And also,
because if we
the
keep
yaqeen that Allah is
procrastinating,
going to help you, and you're not in that journey of
Yeah.
trying to overcome your fear alone. And I think with everything that you've said, the main takeaway for me is that knowledge, all this knowledge that you've been kind enough to share with us today, at the end of the day, it is just information, and reflection needs to take place for that transformation to actually begin.
it's very individual. It's
It's-
very
it's
individual.
very
Nobody can tell you
Yeah.
what your purpose is or what your journey is.
And that's why I think sometimes it's perceived as, a really big step or a really big life-changing moment. But in reality, like we said, it starts with just very raw, honest conversations
And the
with
intention.
yourself and your intention.
And the
الأعمال بالنيات. We start with the intention, inshallah, today, myself first and foremost, and inshallah for everyone watching, to try and strengthen the relationship with our Lord, with Allah, with our soul, with our mind, with our body, with ourselves, and inshallah with each other, inshallah. Sister Zainab, thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, and your hearts and efforts that you have been putting into this work. May Allah bless you, your practice, and everyone that you serve. Thank you so much for your time today. And to everyone listening, I hope that something in today's episode stirred something in you, whether it's a reflection or a relationship that needs attention, or perhaps a numbing habit that you have that's trying to delay and stop yourself from working on this relationship or yourself. Inshallah, that today's episode is going to help you with that. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. And inshallah, we'll see you again on another episode of Her Progeny. Ma'as salam.